So, you've probably seen the news, right?
Mm.
About the ceasefire between Iran and Israel. And I think for a lot of us, the first reaction might have been, okay, good, some calm. Maybe global trade gets back to normal now.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive that kind of pushes back on that idea because the research we've looked at, it actually points to something, well, pretty counterintuitive, this ceasefire. It hasn't really brought back predictability. If anything, it's highlighted that global supply chains are just operating in this world of constant geopolitical risk now.
Exactly. And that's really our mission today. We want to unpack how this sort of uneasy calm is already changing global shipping. We're talking about how routes are being chosen, how costs are calculated, and importantly, what all this means for you. Even when things seem peaceful on the surface, that volatility can stick around and fundamentally change how everything moves.
Welcome to Logistics Pulse, sponsored by Mothership. Skip the broker to save big on LTL shipments or deliver same day nationwide.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Why are ships still avoiding key routes? I mean, places near the Red Sea, there's no, formal closure, right? So what's going on?
Yeah, that's what's fascinating here. It's not about, an active, immediate danger right this second. It's the possibility, the mere whiff of future trouble, future escalation that's driving this behavior change. And companies are thinking way beyond today's news cycle. What happens next week, next month?
Right, and the fallout is real. I mean, for companies shipping goods and ultimately for you buying those goods, rerouting like this, it adds days, sometimes weeks, to transit times, so longer waits. And it definitely pushes costs up. These freight networks, they were built on predictable lanes. Now they're scrambling because those same lanes can become risky overnight. But here's where it gets really interesting based on our research. These problems aren't showing up in market prices like you'd think.
Yeah, this part genuinely surprised me. You'd think, logically, all this disruption, all this rerouting, it has to mean higher freight prices, right? But the market signals, they're telling a different story. Trans-Pacific container rates, they've stayed stable. Some have even dipped slightly. It's kind of defying assumptions that disruption should lead to inflation.
And this raises a really important question, like why isn't that happening? The analysis we're seeing points to a couple of big factors. Weak consumer demand is one, and just plain excess shipping capacity is another. These are acting as sort of counterweights to that rising geopolitical risk. So you get this mismatch between risk and rate. And that makes forecasting incredibly tricky for, well, everyone involved. It basically means that the surface level data, just looking at spot rates today, it may mask deeper vulnerabilities in the system. You can't just look at the price tag and think everything's okay. The underlying risk, it's absolutely still there.
And we're seeing something similar playing out in energy markets too, right? The Strait of Hormuz, that's such a critical choke point for global oil. It's open for now anyway. And crude prices, after that initial spike we saw, they've largely settled down again.
CNBC, for instance, reported that, look, this ceasefire, probably not going to lead to lasting peace there. There's just this widespread concern simmering under the surface. Any new flashpoint anywhere near there could easily trigger renewed shipping chaos. You'd see higher fuel costs again. And another round of those global ripple effects we've unfortunately gotten used to. It's almost like, the water looks calm, but there's a really strong current underneath if you're not watching closely.
So when you piece all this together, the big picture takeaway seems pretty clear. This whole idea of supply chain normalcy, of getting back to how things used to be, it feels like that's fading fast. Companies just can't really plan for stability anymore, with maybe the occasional crisis thrown in.
Right. If you connect this to the bigger picture, the new reality is planning for crisis as a permanent backdrop. It's just part of the landscape now. And in this kind of environment, things like resilience, foresight, they aren't just nice-to-haves anymore. They're not optional. They are becoming core competitive advantages. Adapt quickly or, risk getting left behind.
Okay, so that's the new reality. Crisis is the backdrop. Volatility is ongoing. What does this actually mean for you listening, whether you're, running a business involved in logistics or even just as a consumer? And maybe more importantly, how can companies actually adapt? How do you deal with this?
Let's start with shippers, the folks actually moving the goods. The first big piece of advice, redesign your inventory and fulfillment strategies. Like from the ground up. Yeah, that means you've got to start planning for longer delivery times. Assume delays, basically, especially if your stuff goes anywhere near the Middle East, South Asia, or those major east-west routes. And crucially important, build in more regional redundancy. Think about things like having dual source suppliers, maybe more distributed fulfillment centers. The goal is to stop being totally reliant on one single route or one single port that could just, shut down overnight.
Okay, so inventory and fulfillment network design. What else for shippers? Contracts came up too, right?
Absolutely. Reviewing contract terms and rate structures is key right now. If your contracts have clauses about bunker fuel surcharges, the variable cost of ship fuel, or maybe routing guarantees, yeah, you need to look closely at those. In markets this volatile, locking in a rate might feel safe, but it might not actually reflect the true cost or the true risk involved. It's often smarter now to work with providers who offer flexibility, who offer real-time visibility, rather than just chasing that lowest initial quote, which might hide problems down the line.
Makes sense. So shippers need to rethink inventory, rethink contracts. What's the third big action item for them?
It's really about shifting how you plan. Move towards dynamic, scenario-based planning. Just relying on historical lead times or static delivery schedules. That's just not going to cut it anymore. You need to use tools, scenario planning tools that let you model different outcomes. What's the best case? What's the worst case? Especially thinking about Q3, Q4 planning right now. And maybe most importantly, get your internal teams aligned. Everyone needs to know what threshold triggers a reroute or triggers using expensive air freight or even having to reprioritize which customers get orders first. That proactive planning is vital.
Okay, that's helpful for shippers.
Yep.
Now, what about the carriers?
For carriers, a big one is investing. Seriously investing in real-time risk tracking and communication. Your customers, the shippers, they're going to increasingly expect updates. So carriers that can provide timely alerts, maybe suggest proactive actions when things get dicey, they're going to build trust and, frankly, probably win more premium business.
And being nimble, right? Improving routing agility seems critical too.
Oh, definitely. This means making sure your fleet, your drivers, your underlying logistics tech, it all needs to be able to adjust on the fly. Whether you're handling LTL, FTL, parcel, whatever. Being able to reroute mid-journey or even just offering alternative routes up front during the quoting process. That kind of flexibility can really make a carrier stand out, especially against maybe larger, slower competitors.
Right. And the last piece for carriers was about partnerships.
Yes, strengthening those customer partnerships. Now is absolutely the time to collaborate more deeply with shippers. Be transparent about how you manage risk. Work together to create contingency plans. It's about shifting from just being a service provider to being a true consultative partner. That makes you much more valuable, much more indispensable in this very uncertain world.
Okay, shippers, carriers. Now let's talk about the supply chain leaders. The people overseeing the entire operation. What's the core message for them?
For them, it's about fundamentally integrating geopolitical risk into core planning. This isn't some, special case you hand off to the legal team or the PR department anymore. It needs to be baked right into your forecasting, your budgeting, your sourcing decisions, your everyday logistics choices. It means actively monitoring global hotspots, not just for immediate disruptions, but for those early warning signs of bigger market shifts or pricing trends down the road. It's a daily strategic thing now.
And getting everyone on the same page internally, that shared playbook idea.
Crucial. Yeah, you need to build specific response plans that connect all the dots: procurement, logistics, finance, customer service. They all need to talk to each other. Define in advance how the company responds to a port closure or a sudden fuel price spike or major transit delays. The faster those different teams can move in sync when something actually happens, the less exposure the company has and the quicker you can bounce back.
And the final point for leaders. It was about visibility, not just speed.
Exactly. Look, speed is always going to matter in logistics. Get it there fast. But in these high-risk environments we're talking about, visibility becomes just as critical, maybe even more so. So prioritizing technologies that give you live, real-time updates on shipment status, yes, but also on route risk levels, on port congestion. That kind of detailed, immediate data is what fuels smarter, faster decisions when things are unpredictable. It gives you the edge.
Okay, so let's try and quickly recap the main takeaway here. That recent truce in the Middle East. It might have paused the actual fighting, but it really hasn't brought back predictability to global shipping or the supply chain overall. Far from it.
Right. And that brings us to, I think, a really provocative final thought for everyone listening to consider. For people working in shipping, in supply chain, the real challenge going forward, it isn't just about reacting to the next crisis whenever it pops up. It's really about learning how to operate, how to succeed in a world where the crisis, in a sense, never fully ends. It's always there in the
Yeah.
background.
That's definitely something to chew on. We really hope you'll reflect on how these insights might apply to your own work or your business, or even just how you think about the products you buy. What strategies for resilience, for foresight, can you put in place or advocate for in a world where, uncertainty seems to be the only constant?
For more insights like these, don't forget to subscribe to Logistics Pulse on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.